Hi, and welcome to A Drummer's Guide to, the podcast answering your questions about what it takes to be a professional musician. My name is Emily Dolan Davis. I've been a drummer since 1999 and navigating this professional world and helping others to do the same since 2018, and that's why we're here today. So I have had a question from someone who wishes to remain anonymous, and at this stage I will say, if you have your own things that you're struggling right now with your professional career, maybe you're trying to get into it, maybe you're kind of semi-professional trying to take that leap into going full-time, and anything in between, just reach out to me at emilydrums.com/AMA. You can ask me a question over there and I will answer on a future episode. And as I say, you can stay anonymous like this person, or I can give you a proper shout out, however you want to do it. So let's get into today's question. So as I said, it's from an anonymous person. I do actually know this person, but they want to remain anonymous. And here is the question that they have asked. So, hey Emily, hope everything's going well. It is. Thank you very much. Aside from it being very cold at the moment, but that's fine. I have a heater right next to me to my left. I am in a hat if you're not able to watch right now. I'm in a hoodie. I am cozy. So how would you deal with a band leader that's very stressful, particularly about tempos? He won't let me use a click, or is at least very reluctant to do so. He won't count off the songs and the tempos seem to constantly change. I've spent most of my career playing along to clicks, so adjusting to doing it live has been tricky, and he appears to be constantly frustrated. Thanks, Anon. Okay, so I feel like all of us as musicians, and very much so drummers as a general rule, have had some dealings with people with tempo issues. Now, whether that's internal issues of, I know that I found that I thought that I was playing at the correct tempo when I was younger, and it was only when I started recording gigs that I was playing and they were, songs that I was counting in, I would have swore to you that they were at the right tempo, and I would listen back and go, oh, that's a bit faster than I thought it was, or a little bit slower sometimes, often faster. And I had to work on that personally, and I think we all go through that kind of process. I just had this really random memory. So I remember really distinctly when I was playing with a band called The Hours. It was a double drummer gig, and so this was in 2008, and the other drummer, Andy Tracy, I remember we were using an MPC for click tracks, and he was the only one that had the click. But if I remember rightly, he was only using the visual of the click to count the songs in, and then we'd go. And I remember so well looking like he would count the songs in, and we would be halfway through the song, and I would look over to the MPC and he was still bang in time. And that was always really wow, that was really incredible to me. And even as I sit here now, to count yourself in with a visual click for, let's say you give yourself 4 beats and then you count in for 4 and then you're off, to still be consistently in time halfway through a song is hard. It's very hard to maintain that, to such accuracy. I remember being so in awe of that. But anyway, sorry, I don't know why that suddenly came back to me, but I think we've all had that experience, and I certainly as well, and I'm sure you have too, have had that experience of another band member trying to dictate to you the tempo if you're a drummer, which is a very hard thing for our egos to deal with. Let me tell you, the first time that ever happened to me, I remember very well. I want to say I was probably 12 or 13 at a blues jam. It was a guitarist called Chris, who I have mentioned before. I don't know anything more about this man aside from that he was probably in his late 40s, and he had a kind of disgusting seafoam green style Fender Strat. I think it was a Strat. I'm pretty sure. Maybe it wasn't actually. Maybe it was a Telly. Anyway, and this dude was obsessed with trying to dictate the tempo of songs in a jam. And it taught me to stand my ground at the time. I'm not sure how solid that ground was that I was standing on, but I stood my ground nonetheless as the drummer of the situation. But, you know, since then, there's been plenty of times that has happened where I've sometimes had singers that want to play songs quicker than they are, cover songs, I would say, which have, you know, to me, cover songs have a very specific tempo, unless you're trying to do something different and the covers band or the function band is known for doing different versions of popular songs, fine. I don't have a problem with that. But if you're literally trying to do one for one the cover of the song, the tempo is so the fundamental thing that needs to be right, because if you're playing it too quick or too slow, people don't, it's just every song has an inherent kind of tempo, rhythm, all that sort of stuff. Obviously, especially if you've heard it 100 times on the radio, or maybe it's your favorite song, whatever. So I have a real thing about tempos. So this really spoke to me, this question, and I just started reflecting a little bit on the different sort of scenarios that I've had like that. But as I say, I think for drummers specifically, and I do know that obviously this is a drummer, I do know that in terms of like insecurity, tempo is the number one thing for me as a drummer. Like, if people call out my timekeeping, I get very strange. So I get it. Anon, I get it. It is a whole thing. The difference, I suppose, with this is that it is a band leader. So obviously, if an MD is telling me about tempos and stuff like that, their musical expertise sort of spans a long period of time in terms of years, but a long or a wide breadth of knowledge of different instruments and understanding of music, not just melodically, but obviously rhythmically, timing wise. You know, there are MDs that I know that I do really trust implicitly. However, I don't get the impression that that's the case with this scenario. So I wanted to kind of like touch on a few things, a few ways that you could approach this. What I will say is that because I know this person, I have a little bit of extra knowledge about them, but I'm going to treat this as if it's someone that I don't know as well. So I'm going to sort of offer up probably more suggestions than this particular person needs, but I think it will translate to other people that might be having this same sort of issue, if that makes sense. So, okay, so the number one thing, so there's a two-pronged attack, I'd like to say, and that is an internal attack on your own, not attack, don't attack yourself, please. Like an internal approach, let's go approach, an internal approach, and then an external approach. And I will always head to the internal approach first. It's mainly because, for whatever reason, I will always try and fix, in inverted commas, myself first, make sure that I'm coming correct, basically, before I start talking to other people. There are benefits to that, there are drawbacks to that, because, you know, for me personally, it just comes from having years and years and years of low self-esteem. I'm working on it. And therefore never reaching out for help, never talking to other people, like being ashamed about the fact that I'm not perfect, all this kind of stuff, right? So I would always go internally first. So I'm going to start there. So the first thing, if I were in this position, is that just, like I say, making sure that I'm coming correct to the situation. And that means checking my internal tempos, that they are accurate to what I think that they are. And the way that I would approach this, I've sort of made up three ways. I say made up. These are three ways that I have used in the past. That the third one, I'm slightly embarrassed because it's so over-engineered, but it is who I am. I'm an over-engineered person, and again, this all just comes back to not having to interact with other people, essentially, and try to make sure that I'm so perfect before I present myself to other people. It's a nightmare. Perfectionist issues are so debilitating, let me tell you. I'm 0 out of 5 stars, would not recommend. But anyway, so the first thing I would do to check my timekeeping, essentially my internal timing and accuracy of my timing, is playing along to a click. Now look, all of us, drummers, guitarists, bass players, we all play along to metronomes, we would hope. If you're not, I would highly suggest it. But so there's something that my dad used to do for me when I was a kid, and I sort of carried that on later on is that before we would go to blues jams on a Tuesday or a Thursday night, basically, when between the ages of 11 and 16, basically, we'd go to at least one a week. And before we did, I would get on my electronic kit, so I must have been at least 13 at this stage, and I would play along to blues songs, often either John Mayall or B.B. King or Jimi Hendrix, which is ironic because what I'm about to tell you, like, okay. And basically, I would play, he would turn down the volume for like a bar, a couple of bars, 4 bars, and when he turned it back up, we would see how my timing was. I say that this is ironic because obviously a lot of these records were not recorded to click and sometimes fluctuated slightly. I know this now, at the time, didn't know. So anyway, I found that quite, not just beneficial, but quite fun. So because I'm a nerd, and I carried that on later on in life. I would use metronomes where they would drop out for like a couple of beats, a bar, 2 bars, 4 bars, 8 bars. And it was a really, really good way to not just understand time, but strengthen my confidence in my timing, that I knew it, I felt it, it was just part of me. It wasn't something that I had to necessarily concentrate on. All I needed to do was trust myself. That's kind of the point I got to with that. So I would really, really, really recommend doing that if you have never done that. It's a really good starting point. With regards to songs, because this is a more specific thing, and again, this is something that I did, what I would do is so this is going to sound quite extreme, but it's only going to get more extreme in a minute, only by a little bit, but even so. So what I would do, I would take a set list of songs, and for each song, I would put it into Logic or a DAW of your choice, a digital audio workstation of your choice. And so I'd drag it into there as an MP3. And then what I would do, I would mark on the song where the one of the drums comes in, for instance, right? And in fact, it didn't even need to be the one of where the drums come in. It could be somewhere during the song or whatever, but always marking the one with a marker, right? And then what I'd do is record separately in the same, so I would probably mute that track, to be honest. I'd mute that track, and then I would record drums, and I would play, say, 8 bars as if I'm coming into the song, like literally. Even, in fact, I tell you what I used to do 4 clicks into it, and then hit 1, do 8 bars, whatever. And then I would drag that into the actual song and listen back and see how accurate I was with the tempo, essentially. Now look, obviously in terms of it kind of gelling with the song, probably not, because you're not reacting to the instruments actually on the track. Obviously in your mind you are. But yeah, that I felt was a really good way of testing how accurate I was being with how fast I thought the song was versus what it is, like objectively, not subjectively, objectively, this is the speed of the song. So I would do that to test myself. And through doing that, I actually found ways, like the most accurate ways for me to get correct tempos. When never thinking about the starts of songs, it was always singing like the hook or the chorus or somewhere in the verse. Like there would be a particular phrase that I would remember from each song that then would inform my tempo. And for whatever reason that works for me. And I think it's partly to do with the fact that I do, like, the lyrics informs so much of what I play. Like that is what I'm playing to, or that is what I'm accompanying. So to me, that sort of anchors it for me. So I found that out. Now here's the slightly even more extreme version that I would do, is that just to take out and again, this is only if you're kind of into more involving more technology and over engineering it like I did. So I would do the same thing, as in take the song into, say, Logic. In my case, I would put that marker on a 1 beat, and then what I would do is I had a system on my kit, a MIDI setup, where when I hit a pad on my kit, it would start Logic recording. So I would just make sure that the record point was on that one. So I would do the same thing. I would play 8 bars of like what I felt the tempo was, and then I would hit that pad, and then see how I did, see how in time I was. Now this is kind of cutting out the having the rigmarole of kind of going back and forth between playing and listening. It's a more immediate feedback of how accurate you are. So anyway, welcome to my brain. Those are 3 things that I personally would do. And again, it's not just about checking like you're coming correct. It's about having confidence in your own abilities, because I think a lot of us, nay, all of us, have moments of imposter syndrome, feeling unconfident, questioning, oh my gosh, am I doing this correctly? Is this right? If you have that internal, it's not even just confidence, because I feel that sometimes people do have confidence, but they don't have the evidence to back it up. But let me tell you, if you've done hours and hours of this where you have continually just tested yourself, checked your progress, checked your timing, your tempos, all of those things, and look, you're never going to get it 100% right, we're human here, but if you've done it enough that you're like, look, I just know this in my mind. But also I think there always needs to be a little bit of leeway of like, you're not perfect, and that's okay. But anyway, so those are kind of the practical things that I would do internally. The second sort of prong to this is the external side of things. And this is what I would find most difficult, but I do feel that this would be really, really beneficial in your case. I also know that this person can't walk away from this job currently. So, walking away is not an option, which to me, well, it is always an option. It always is, but they don't feel it is right now, and that's fine. I respect that. Absolutely. I will also say that my go-to move was to walk away a lot of the time, and retrospectively, I regret that. I wish I had the bravery to actually have difficult conversations, but I did not. I was a coward sometimes. I would use excuses to get out of there rather than feeling a little bit uncomfortable about having a conversation. So yes, something I'm working on, aren't we all? My goodness. So what I would say is, with this band leader, I think sitting down and addressing it would be very beneficial. I think it would be very difficult, but the potential for it really actually strengthening your relationship with this person, and maybe future work that you do together, can actually be really, really great. So the first and foremost, the way that I would approach this, because I think it's very easy to get egos involved and kind of either point out things that you feel the other person is doing wrong, or get very defensive on your side. It's human nature, it is. But I think coming at it from a point of, because you've even said this is what I love about this message, is that there is an element clearly of like understanding that they are frustrated. So they say that he appears to be constantly frustrated, as in the band leader. So personally, what I would do is first out the gate just say, look, I wanted to talk to you about this because I can clearly see that you're really frustrated. Or it comes, maybe not I can clearly see, but more like it comes across that maybe you're feeling frustrated when it comes to the tempos of songs. And I don't want that for me, for you, for the band, and for the audience. We're here playing music. There's meant to be an element of fun. It doesn't need to be so frustrating. So can we try and work together to get to a place where we're both happy with the tempos? Obviously, it's a big part of my job, and I'm here to facilitate, essentially. So I think if you come at it from that kind of perspective, I think that's a really useful way of doing it, because you're not attacking. You're just saying, look, I can see that you're really frustrated. I want to help you. You can even say, look, I feel quite frustrated too, and I don't want us to feel frustrated. Like, life's too short. It's not that deep. You know what I mean? I know this person, they're not a bad person, and I would assume that this band leader is also not a bad person. You just want to get on and have as nice a time as you can doing, this. we get to do jobs that we love. So let's try and make this a nice working environment, because inevitably this is also probably spilling out to the rest of the band as well. People can feel frustration. Same with audience members to a degree. But anyway, so I would approach a conversation like that, definitely. And then sort of say, I'd love if we could work together to rectify this in some way. Now, you had mentioned that they said they're very reluctant to let you use a click. So I would suggest it again. Just say, look, how would you feel about maybe not using a click throughout the whole song? Because, this is the other thing I was going to say. Maybe ask the question, like, I'm really curious. I'd love to understand why you don't want me using a click. Like, what's your experience? Why do you feel that way? Or has something happened that has really put you off a drummer using a click? And understand why that is, because everyone has these past experiences where they feel burned by, it can be one experience that they feel burned by, but they've informed the rest of their decisions off the back of that one thing. We all do it. I have done it for sure. So I think understanding that will sort of help you understand why this tempo thing clearly is a thing. So I think that's a good starting point. Off the back of that, you can then talk about, okay, well, this is why I like using a click. And you will have your reasons. For me personally, it's like, look, I know that we are going to be playing these songs at the tempo that they are, that is correct, that the audience want to hear, that, it's tempos that they're going to want to dance at. They're going to recognize these songs if we play them at the correct tempo of which they were recorded. Blah, 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 blah. There's any number of reasons. You have your own reasons. I have my own reasons. So I think voicing some of those are really good. Could be very good. Obviously, read the room slightly. They may not be open to this at all, in which case all of this is completely obsolete. But, we've got to try and go in with some sort of collaborative notion. The other thing that I would do, so if they sort of say, look, no, I just really don't want you playing with a click throughout the thing, just say, okay, cool. How about as a compromise, I have the click for the first 2 bars of the song. So I have 1 bar for myself, 1 bar to count in. I count in the songs and we go. Now, I would hazard a guess and say that this band leader might not be happy with that, because it feels like they're the band leader. They're literally, it's in their name. They want to be the one that is leading the whole thing. They want to be in control. That's fine. At the end of the day, that's what they've been hired to do. In which case, say, okay, would you mind having a click for 2 bars and doing the same thing? Which might be a more difficult conversation, but we'll see. And you can express your frustrations with the changes in tempos and stuff like that in a delicate way, obviously. And then if they're kind of seeming a bit open to that, then you can say, look, I will sit down and I will do the tempos for you. So you don't even need to do anything. Like, if you offer to either help or take half of the songs each to kind of work out what the tempos are, or sit down together and just agree on, okay, because some of these might be standards. I don't know. There might be jazz standards, in which case, there's a plethora of tempos that it could be. But maybe making it a collaborative endeavor where you're like, let's sit down and agree what these tempos are, and then we can just go from there. That way there's an element of consistency. We can both, and by extension all, feel happy about the gigs each night. We can go away thinking, yeah, like we nailed that or whatever. It's just taking away one of the sort of uncertainties of the night, because everyone just wants to play music and have fun, I assume. Like, I don't think this person's trying to, undermine anyone by doing these tempo things. If they do, they've got their own issues, and that's fine. But I think just opening up the conversation is really good. And again, I think framing it like, I just want to minimize the frustration, and I think that this will do that, is a really, really, really useful way to frame it. So it's not about the person being wrong, you're not attacking the person, they're not then getting defensive or attacking you back, or vice versa. Like, I think just acknowledgement. I learned very recently, like in the last 2 years, I'd say, just the power, and in fact even more so in the last 6 months, really a lot, the power of just acknowledgement and feeling acknowledged, and the reverse of that. Like, when people don't feel acknowledged, they start acting in very sometimes irrational ways, very destructive ways sometimes, very ego-driven ways. And I think that, or sometimes just, they end up going inside themselves and becoming very depressed and just unseen, and like they don't matter. And I think that actually, like, I keep saying like a lot today, so I apologize. But I think the leaders of situations face this a lot, whether it's a band leader, whether it's kind of, I don't know, someone that's looking after a group of people in a management sense. I don't know. I think people are so quick to give flack to those people, but actually to be acknowledged, like you'd hope as a leader, you'd hope that they are the one acknowledging the people that are working for them. You'd hope. To me, that's a great leader, or a great teacher, say. There's a level of acknowledgement, but not very often do you find that it comes back to them from people, where you just like, look, and acknowledging that I can see that, or I feel that maybe you're a little frustrated. Can we look at that? Like, just that acknowledgement, I think, will go such a long way in finding a solution. And it's treating them like a human, and that they're not a machine that just says, right, play this song now, go. So I think approaching it in that way will really, really help. Having that bravery to have that conversation, let me tell you, massive, at least in my world. In my mind, that is huge. And as I say, I think those difficult conversations actually will end up strengthening. Well, I'd hope that they will strengthen both of your bonds. And who knows, in the future, maybe you'll end up working together again in a different capacity, because, that bond is strengthened. You now can communicate in a more honest way, in a deeper way. When this other person will now know that if some form of conflict comes up, you are able to deal with it in a very considered and kind way, but also that you make them feel acknowledged, which is so powerful, dude. I can't even begin to tell you. I really can't, because I have experienced it, and then I see it when I'm able to do that for other people. It's huge. It's so huge. So I think that's all I had to say on that side of things. Let me just look at my notes real quick. Yeah, I think framing it for the good of the show as well is a really powerful thing. So it's not about you two as individuals, it's about the good of the show, the good of the music, the good of the audience, the good of the gig. Like, let's do it like that. So I think that can really hopefully that will help. So I think that is how I would approach it if I were in your shoes. Anon, I would say internal first, just check that you are coming correct. Obviously, if you're not and you don't have the time to sort it out quickly, it takes time, these things, it takes so much time, all the resources, maybe you don't have that kind of setup to make that work. Do as much as you can, but then when you're coming to the person and saying, right, how can we approach this, you will know what your limitations are. So for instance, you can, I think by having the click at the beginning of the songs, that will mitigate any sort of issues going on. And yeah, the time if your timing is not 100%, it may fluctuate a little bit throughout the shows. Also, I didn't mention this, maybe recording the shows and listening back would be good. And then you can sort of say, look, I noticed, yesterday when we played X, it was really quite quick. And again, that becomes a bit minutiae, so hopefully let's not get it to that point. Record it and listen back for your own purposes, for your own knowing, okay, my timing, maybe I was rushing a bit here, maybe I was dragging a bit here, let me work on that. And by virtue of just listening to it back and doing it again every night, or however often however often you're gigging. That doesn't make sense. The frequency of your gigs, you will just get better every time that you do a gig, basically, just by listening back, even without actively doing something. Obviously, if you can actively do something, that will progress that forward, but even the act of doing it will improve your level of everything, quite honestly. So anyway, I think that's it. I'm not sure that I finished my last sort of thought, but Yes, internal, external, go for that, see how it goes. If they react badly, then that's something else. But essentially, you're in the same position that you are right now. So therefore, you may as well try. You may as well try, come at it with kindness, see how it goes. And I know at some point you will have the choice to leave this situation. So this is for this specific person, Anon, in which case, this won't last forever. It's just holding out for a little bit longer, and then you can make a different decision in the future when these sorts of things come up. But anyway, I hope that has helped, Anon. And thank you, Anon, for your question. Thank you so much. Interesting sort of thinking of it in that way, in a practical sense, and then in a conversational sense. Excuse me. If you have your own situation that you're currently struggling with, if there's a very specific event that's happening, or, something that's happened recently to you and you're just like, oh my gosh, I need to make sense of this. Like, am I crazy to think this way or feel bad about what happened or blah, 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 blah. And hopefully I can offer you a little bit of insight, probably a lot of, I've had that happen too. There'll probably be a lot of that, and hopefully some steps to move forward, because, all musicians, all humans have had setbacks in one way or another, and we are all moving forward all of the time, we hope. Sometimes there's a few steps back, but on the whole, we're moving forward, you would hope. That's our intention, at least. But if you have your own question or thing that you're struggling with right now, if you go to emilydrums.com/AMA, then you can submit your question there. Again, you can either get a shout out or stay anonymous, like this lovely Anon person. If the public platform seems a little bit too intense for you, but you still want to have some sort of sounding board in a more private way, then I do also offer one-to-one coaching. I actually offer a free 30-minute session, just a taster session, basically, to see if it's something that you might want to do more long term. It's 30 minutes. We have a chat about where you are, where you want to be, and then I will tell you anything that sort of comes to mind in the moment. So if you go to emilydrums.com, you can sign up to do that. I've got a few more slots left before Christmas, if you're listening to this before Christmas 2025. And if you're listening to it after, then who knows what kind of slots I have, but you can go and have a look if you go to emilydrums.com. But I shall love you and leave you on that note. I hope that you're having a lovely day wherever you are, whatever you're up to, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time for another subject. Oh, remember the whole like, share, subscribe thing. You know the thing. You know the deal. All right, I'll see you soon. All right, bye.